So Macy's still does their anthems at Christmas. And, they've been inspired by Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis and the British department store brands that really invented this idea of, we're not going to sell you anything. We're just going to tell you a beautiful story that is going to be so emotional. You're going to be weeping by the end of it. But
Fred Godfrey joins the ADOTAT Show to explain why most ads are emotional wallpaper. DCO is being misused by data hoarders, and the best campaigns sell nothing, but make you feel everything.
Eric Troutman, the czar of the TCPA, isn't just the guy you call when your phone rings too much. He's the guy you must call. Need to navigate the legal minefield of robocalls, texts, and telemarketing nightmares? Troutman doesn't just give you advice. He hands you a roadmap, a compass, and a do not press this button sign. Practical? Yes. Actionable? Absolutely. And if you're not calling him first, let's be honest, you're probably making a mistake.
All right, here we go. Fred Godfrey's back for his third round on the ADOTAT Show. And let's be real, he's not here to play nice. As CEO of Origin, he's the guy who's turned connected TV into a gold mine, while his competitors are still trying to find the remote. If you think you've heard it all about CTV, Fred is here to prove you wrong again. First of all, Fred, third time's the charm. Let's get into it. How are you doing?
I'm great. I didn't realize that we were on spin number 3. It's a bit of a privilege. But I would say life has been getting progressively better since the first time we did this, and then occasionally getting a little bit worse, but trending upwards, I would say, in general, along with everything else in life. But I'm jolly well and excited that we've, at Origin, kicked off the year better than we have in the previous 6 that we have been alive. And excited to see what the year has ahead, I guess.
Let's kick this off with the elephant in the room. Dynamic creative optimization. Everyone talks about it, but if you actually understand what it means beyond swapping out a few images, but you've been waving the flag about DCO and its magical powers of personalization. So why do you think media buyers are just now waking up to it? Were they in a coma, or is the industry really that slow?
It's neither the coma nor the slowness thing. I think it boils down to the same reason or excuse that we have for a lot of things being slow to pick up in the industry in general, specifically in connected TV. It's awareness and education. People have been so laser focused over the last 10 years in what can be done with a display ad or a small video on little screens that are far easier to handle and manage and change and so on, that they haven't really ever stopped, or enough people haven't stopped to think, well, could this not also be done in this digital version of television? And they are now beginning to realize that, on top of the fact that there is a need for them to be realizing that. So they're actually now beginning to hunt for the solutions that can allow them to optimize their creatives, compounded by the other fact that media buyers, which make up 95% of Origin's client base, are under further scrutiny by the brands that they are entrusted to represent to deliver more and more demanding results and outcomes from the investments that their clients are making. Together with that is this, oh yeah, the creative really matters. And we can't just run the same thing across the board. We need to be really smart about it. And now the technology exists where we can be really smart about it. The measurement tools exist where we can prove that we're being really smart about it. Bless you. And so now it is starting to come together, but it has felt like an aha moment for a lot of our clients when we actually express to them how much the creative can really play a role in delivering the outcomes that they are being benchmarked against by their clients.
yes.
So
did that first
Is it
bit.
a not knowing or is it not wanting to know situation? Like, I have this gym membership that I've never canceled and I just pretend it doesn't exist.
That sounds like my wife in the JCC around the corner, which I hope she will never hear that I said that. But it's not knowing. Yes, they do want to know. And what we have seen, and honestly, it's one of those classic cases of the numbers speaking for themselves, is that once they know, they know. Every one of our mainstay clients increases their budgets with us by almost 100% year on year. And they have done now for 5 years, for the longest that have worked with us. And it's because they've seen the results for themselves, which is such a corny thing to say. And I hate saying the corny things, but once they know, they love it. And, at the end of the day, part of our sort of tweaked narrative for 2025 when talking to our clients, which, as I said, is basically, media buyers and media planners, is our job at Origin is to make you the hero for your client, because you don't want the revolving door of these people going in and out just simply looking for the cheapest agency to represent them. They actually need an agency that is going to help them hit the thresholds that they need. And now in TV, that includes actual performance, actual outcomes, ROAS, ROI, all those initials that really matter. And the creative helps a ton.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would take full credit for your meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
A ton.
So you've talked before that quality is actually more important than quantity in DCO. We keep on seeing these brands pumping out all these generic ads, thousands of different creatives, and trying to optimize, the minutia. Are they hoarders or just clueless?
They're trying to squeeze, in my mind, the remaining fragments of success out of a very old playbook. A lot of people think that I can still have my generic creative, but if I'm really clever and get even more, dweebish around the targeting or the frequency or some form of data usage that chooses where that generic creative goes, thereby creating more efficiency because it's not being wasted elsewhere, they are still finding that is a way to find incremental change and improvement. But to take it to the next level, they need to start looking at the story itself. And one of the things that we really, I think, do well, and walked into it completely by accident, just to be clear, is showing people actually what happens if you do both. We manage a lot of the budgets for our clients. We are a full service creative and media buying agencies for media buying agencies and creative teams. And we're very, very good at trafficking our clients' campaigns. So they get that efficiency as well as then an optimized creative. But then where it's getting more fun is how optimized can optimized be? It's if you're a bank looking at offering mortgages, your mortgage rates might change every single day. And to be able to say to people, hey, today is Tuesday, the 15th of March, this is today's mortgage rates, or if you're a tax filer talking about recent changes in legislation, it's all things that people don't expect to see on TV. And that's part of the way that we're actually getting people to look again, and which is the first and biggest and frankly only real challenge. And so therefore it becomes the opportunity. Clever DCO, really dynamic DCO, is the way of actually creating the value exchange between the viewer and the brand that's trying to sell you something.
So if DCO is so effective, should we be planning the funeral for the traditional ad creative?
Not necessarily, because you got the O bit, which is optimization, and then you do have what we coined as DCP, which is the production side, which we've done for, a financial institution in the past, for example, where the entire ad was dynamic from soup to nuts, every single pixel. But that is a far less common risk that people are willing to take. They still want their celebrity with their live action driving the ram off the cliff with a big wig, I'm just thinking of the ad that I saw last night. And they want to then work around that or within that to then add a layer, of interest that is effectively being produced and delivered by folks like us. So it still requires that foundation, that cornerstone, which might be a generic spot, but it really does depend on how generic that spot is and what leeway we have when it comes to layering what we do in, which is something that we're different about. We preach a lot about don't just go slapping something on top of the ad that could end up disguising or hiding a really critical part of the story. We look at every single moment, every frame, every transition and work out where could this story be optimized or be enhanced? Where can it happen where it belongs without either covering up part of the ad or squeezing the poor thing back into some tiny little square of pixels in the top left of the TV and becoming irrelevant? you might as well just not pay for your ad if you're going to do that.
So let's say I give you $1 billion to make the ultimate DCO campaign. What would that monster look like?
For $1 billion, I think the answer is it'll look like anything you want. But the more serious answer, I think we would put it. I think if we had $1 billion to spend on the ultimate, dynamic, creative monster, it would start by understanding everything that makes that particular brand appealing or vital or sexy to the people that they want buying it. And once we've then separated all of those really appealing things, look at how real time, like how much do these things change? Is it like mortgage rates that I mentioned, or is it like a weekly deal, right? Like those are very different things. Understanding all of those and then working out where within the narrative to make sure that these things can become the star of the show, but without taking over from the core message itself, where it becomes like an addendum, if you will, is how something would become a beast. But ultimately, it would be no different to stuff we've done for other people like Macy's, where you could have either every single household that's seeing this campaign, this previously generic ad that's been optimized, or every town or every precinct or every county getting their own version of it, right? Whether it's talking about precipitation levels or how dry the grass is, if you're Scott's Miracle-Gro or something like that. It's got to be storytelling within a framework that is relatable to people watching TV.
Does it get creepy?
I think it would get creepy if someone was to turn on their TV and get an ad and be like, hey, Johnny, we heard that you're 41.
That's
the truth. Well, that would be less creepy. Let's say that you work with Johnny, and let's say that you're, and you suffered from ED, and there it was telling you, hey, Johnny, like you and your next door neighbor Carl have something in common. You both have ED, and like that would be creepy. But that's not where television is going. We all made that mistake in the past, and I think that that's not the kind of intelligence or data that is really good for television. The best example I always give is the baby strollers, right? If you have this $1 billion stroller brand and you sell $100,000 strollers, like we all see trotting up and down the Upper West Side, right? You wouldn't be thought foolish to think, right, well, let's target all of our ads to people of this age, this income range, who are married, have kids, or come off contraception or whatever, right? And that is true. That is one cohort. But it's very easy then to forget the other cohort, which is Aunt Mildred, who's looking to find a baby shower present, right? For you. Like, you don't want to get too smart for your own good. You just want to make sure that you're telling a seamless and fairly addictive story on top of the final bit, which I'll always say to our most progressive clients really do appreciate this, is the best ad should really sell nothing. It sells you an emotional attachment. It sells you the need to know more and to want to discover more, but it doesn't shove it down your throat.
So I want to talk a little bit about another misunderstood beast, market consolidation. And you've been around for a while. You've seen Trimmer videos early days and today's consolidated behemoths. Now, Every single week, there's a headline about another acquisition. Do you think this is the natural evolution of the industry? Are we watching the tech giants build their own Death Star?
I mean, I think it's natural, right? Because it's natural, especially in an industry where so many things are just so fundamentally wrong and broken. We are not at this point in time operating in a sustainable business. Too many people want the money that's floating around and are good at earning and justifying it. But it's not creating enough for people, especially people who are either public or want to go public, when the people who are determining the value of that stock really know nothing about what it is that you do or how the television sausage is made, right? So as a result, this consolidation is the only way, if you can't beat them, join them or eat them and become your own, basically kill your competition by absorbing it and becoming your own competition. And that way you can start operating more of a monopoly. I'm not saying this is good. I'm saying this is absolutely fucking terrible. But you can now basically create a monopolistic business and be the lord of your own creation. And that is just an inevitable road, I think, for industries like ours, where there are too many people looking for too few pieces of pie. And I think that it's dangerous. I think that it really does stop progress. It stops innovation. It makes it very hard for little people like us to be remembered and seen and heard, even though we're the ones that are fueling a lot of the change that eventually gets adopted. But there's also every chance that we get sort of put through a mincer and turned into a, sausage roll in the process. But hopefully not.
How much is this just Darwinian evolution?
Well, I think in a capitalist economy, I think, if that's like sort of the premises of this Darwinian hypothesis, I would say that it's completely natural.
So is there any examples of acquisitions recently that you actually felt changed the game and rewrote the rules? Something that actually was seismic, using a buzzword.
There have been, so we've noticed an increase in M&A activity over the last 6 to 9 months, and we've been keeping quite a beady eye open on it. But I would actually tell you that the M's and the A's that I think that we have seen since the second half of last year have been less seismic or less interesting than what was happening about 6 to 12 months before that, when suddenly there was a lot of interest in in agencies making acquisitions on the creative side, because they were beginning to get on the train of understanding the efficiency and how happy they could make their clients if all of that was consolidated. But as someone who does try and stay on top of the trades, I now feel embarrassed that I can't immediately think of one of the more recent ones that I think is an obvious and like behemoth acquisition, but I'm sure I'll think of it as soon as we finish this discussion.
So do you think, let's be blunt about something else, is Google going to kill its ad exchange business? And if so, who benefits the most?
And don't know. Like, do I think it will? Maybe in time. But I don't know if they've got the right reason or need to do so just now, unless they're just bored of it. Like, I know that there's, people are creeping up around them and taking more of the market share, especially in connected TV. But I think they're still fairly they're the sort of the vanilla ice cream option, in the freezer full of really other strange flavors. I think there'll always be a market for it. So I doubt, unless it becomes unsustainable or, uneconomical for them to keep running, then they'll just keep it going. That'd be my guess. But I'm not really the best guy to ask there.
Okay, so I'm going to name you for a day that you're the dictator of ad tech. And if you were in charge, how would you regulate all these giants? Would you just let them fight it out and see who survives?
No, I really wouldn't, actually. I would take people like the trade desk to task and, and ask them if they're really looking at the good of humanity from an advertising perspective, or if they're simply really good at making up narratives and semantics and press releases that are designed to, create a glossy sheen on top of intentions that are just simply not transparent. So I think I would try and force a little bit more integrity out of the industry. But then you do also have behemoths that I don't think are necessarily evil, right? Like I don't, I'm not that anti-conformist that I don't like any billion-dollar companies. I would love Origin to be acquired by a billion-dollar company. If any of you are out there listening, and we're a really good company, by the way, and we're profitable, and email me if you want to know anything else. But the truth is that I would, before creating regulation, though, I think I would try and come up with a rule book, a universal rule book that everyone can at least understand. A bit like in Silicon Valley, right? When he writes his ethics book, right? The most.
You've mentioned this show, I think, twice now, and I really should watch it. And so does other guests.
Yeah, point. And if anybody here who's seen Silicon Valley, they'll know about the code of ethics written by the most unethical man in Silicon Valley. It's just all a bit lip servicey, and it's actually very frustrating to watch, and it's also accurately true to form. But I think I would try and get an understanding first, as well as some definitions out the way, and then a bit of regulation around how people can wall off their own gardens and actually understand. I think I'd put everybody through an academy as well to understand, from like birth to someone sitting at home watching a show, like what are all the things that are involved and required? Because guess what? They all cost money. So if you want to sit here somewhere where you think you're at the top of the tree and wall everything off and think that you can charge whatever you want, you've got to know that there is a cost attached to that downstream, which may be the quality of the content that you're relying on.
You've mentioned several times before this wild notion that the best ad sells nothing, and that's a statement that make a Mad Men character punch a wall. So, can you explain this to me? Are we just like giving away the farm now?
I think that we've lost. I mean, I know I've said this probably to you before. I said a lot. Advertising has become too much. It's like music, right? I used to, when I was running my last company, I had to spend a week every week in Hollywood, schmoozing and dining and, all these sort of music people and producers and artists and this kind of thing. And I remember there was this one evening, I'm getting to a point, I promise, just tell me if you get bored. There was one evening when I was sitting up in the Hollywood Hills in this guy's house with this big terrace overlooking Los Angeles. And I thought it was really cool. And this guy had a recording studio, and an artist came along and, she was booked to be in the studio. And we got chatting over a beer, and then she went into the studio and I watched her do her music. And then afterwards she came out and she had a guitar and she was playing. And I was like, this is so much nicer. What you're playing now is like, honestly, much nicer music than what you're playing in the studio. And she said, well, yes, because in the studio, what I'm recording, basically comes down from the label as to what the algorithms are telling me people are going to buy. Right? What is the optimal beat? How many words can I say in a sentence, and how long should the song be, and what should it be about, and all this kind of thing, right? So it's actually been almost predetermined. And I think that where I now get this back to advertising is it's become a very similar beast. At the scale now that we've all learned we can advertise, right? People see 2,000 or 200,000 ads a day or something without realizing, we've learned that basically it's become a science how you can make an ad convert, and it's therefore no longer an art. Whether it should be one shade of yellow versus a different shade of yellow, because when they split test it, they discovered that shade of yellow had a 0.03% greater likelihood of making someone buy that thing from that Instagram ad that probably doesn't work, right? And so what we've forgotten about is we're so focused on the science and the facts behind an ad that we've forgotten that it's an ad, that it's meant to be an introduction to something, it's meant to be a story. And where we need to go now is in the middle, right? We need to remember, especially with television. Like television you can't just take all the laws of social and desktop and just apply them to TV, because it's a different environment, it's a different experience. People are sitting back, they're tired, they're probably a bit grumpy, they've got their gin and tonic, they just want to relax. They want to be entertained, which is very different to when, you're doing anything else and you might see an ad. So we need to find the balance between creating something that is thought-provoking and relevant, but not in that I'm an auto-intender relevant kind of way, but feels like it's speaking to me, but doesn't have to be forcing me to buy something. I will make that deduction on my own, but you've got my interest. It's like how ads used to be back in the days.
Can you give me an example of an ad that sold nothing but crushed it? Like, I want to feel goosebumps.
So yeah, there was, when I was about 5 or 6, there was an ad that came on telly. I remember it was the mid-80s. I think we were probably watching a James Bond on our big Trinitron TV. And I remember, the ads came on and it was just this blue writing that went across the screen and it just went, brrrr. That was it. 6 months later, Ariel releases the world's first cold wash laundry detergent. Sorry, it's street sweeping day. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyone who lives in New York will know what street sweeping day is like.
Yeah. There's changing sides right now.
Yeah, it's the Thunderdome out there for anyone who's interested. Anyway, but it was just a quick, simple, clever and beautiful story that just got you asking questions.
which were then answered, right? Because they had enough trust in themselves and they had enough trust in the viewer that the two would eventually come together. And here I am 35 years later, still telling that story, still remembering that ad. But another type of ad, which I think is a really good example that we do still see many of today, are what we call anthems, right? So Macy's still does their anthems at Christmas. And, they've been inspired by Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis and the British department store brands that really invented this idea of, we're not going to sell you anything. We're just going to tell you a beautiful story that is going to be so emotional. You're going to be weeping by the end of it, but you're going to feel really attached, really, really attached. And you almost feel this sense of pride and emotive obligation to now be a patron of that particular department store, of that brand. And that is an ad that sells nothing at all, but they're the ones that get talked about.
So I want to move a little bit and talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy and mentorship. In our first interview, I know we talked about it a little bit, and we never got around to talk about it extensively, so now's a great time. I know you have some heavy-hitting mentors like David Sable, who taught you the fine art of listening and emotional intelligence. So in a world where most leaders seem to right now be screaming orders, how did that influence your leadership style? Do you lead with compassion, or do you mix a little drill sergeant into the mix?
Always, if the answer to that question in my mind is entirely contingent upon what your troops are like. And if you trust your troops and you trust you've made the right decisions in the folks that you want to have within your little company family, right, then that determines the entire answer from there. So I will provide my response based on the troops that we have at Origin, right, which is we are a small family of incredibly, incredibly close-knit people who all care about the job and care about each other, and therefore will never create a situation where we have to put another person's neck out of joint because we've gone and solved something that, on an unrealistic, let's say, time basis, right? So with that, I know that everybody cares about what they do. And so when they fuck up, and they do, and I do, we all do, the first thing to remember is this isn't deliberate. They probably tried very, very hard. So the first thing is compassion, right? So what were you, not like, what were you thinking, but what were you thinking when you made this decision or when you chose to take this route? Because I want to know if actually there was a logical premise behind it. And maybe that logical premise is a very natural place for us then to revisit and reconsider how we handle that particular process or protocol. Right? What is the natural, where is the muscle memory actually going to take that person who's doing that thing? And so leading compassionately and saying, I care about the fact that I want you to wake up in the morning and want to come to work. And I want you to finish the day feeling like you didn't just waste 8 hours or 10 hours of your day because you need to get paid. That's not healthy. Forget whether it's good for the company, which it isn't. Like, fuck that. It's not healthy for the individual. And, none of us are here for very long. So we might as well try to feel respected and be in a position and do a job that we do love, that gives me the bandwidth to explore and have my own autonomy and show my own initiative. And we've got people at the company who we've started very young, who didn't have that at a previous job, who then had to go through the learning process of understanding what it's like to be given autonomy and to show initiative, and for them not to be frightened to speak out, speak up, and mess up. Because as long as we know that the intention was there, that's the only thing that really matters. The rest of it is just guidance, right? But then there are times when there is actually a little bit of dictation, shall we say. If there is something really important that we need to be doing as a company, or a certain department needs to be revisiting or doing differently or in a new way, but they're just consistently not because they're in such a regular habit of doing something the old way, that's where I am not frightened to, put the hammer down. Like, guys, I remember we called in August last year, we had
campaigns launching simultaneously on the same day. And we were about a week and a half out from that launch window. And as tightly process and protocol driven as every single thing at Origin is, I could see that the wheels were starting to come off, right? It was the height of the summer. It was halfway through the year. We were all very tired. And I could tell that there was scrambling to just get each thing done. It doesn't matter how, as long as the end product is delivered on time. And so I called a timeout, and an all hands about 2 hours after I called a timeout on every single project that we were working on simultaneously. And I said, what the fuck is going on here? Like, all the rules are out the window. All the processes that we rely on are being ignored because you think you're saving time. This is not correct. This is not accurate. This is going to lead us into further trouble. And, people did leave that call in tears. Like, it was very uncharacteristic of me. Certainly Stephen would never talk to the crew that way, but I was deeply concerned about, most importantly, like our clients getting exactly what they, were paying for, but also concerned that we were all wasting a lot of energy. And so that did require being extremely firm, but it doesn't just come straight out that way. You've got to sort of guide and push and just see if people will get there themselves. But then if they don't, you have to make the message clear. But
So do you think most leaders know about emotional intelligence in this industry?
I'd like to think so. I really would. But I think it's all rooted in trust at the end of the day, right? If you don't trust the people that you're paying, then I don't think anything else is really relevant. You've got to trust them to be either trying or trust them enough that you don't need to micromanage, but you go away. Maybe they have a different way about doing something that leads to the right result. And therefore it's up to you as the leader to revisit what the process is. That's one of our big rules, trying to avoid like, it's my way or the highway, right? Yeah, sure, I've got 25 years of learning under my belt, but that doesn't mean I've got it right.
So you've led teams through pivots and massive industry changes. Do you think the whole people first philosophy is overhyped?
Not even remotely. I mean, look, yes, there are different divisions within a company where I think that it's like skill first versus people first, if that's what you mean. But speaking on a broad strokes, I never read a resume before I interview somebody. I'm far more interested in understanding who they are as a person, the unteachable, the unlearnable skills, than I am about what qualifications they have, which may or may not even be relevant to the job they're going to have. Character is not something that you can learn. It's something that you either have or you don't. And so, no, I don't think it's overhyped. We have people who, like, we had our first, like, retreat in April last year, right? And it was the first time that everyone had actually all got together, because Origin's 100% remote, and we have been since 2019. And I remember walking past one of our tables of folks over breakfast, and I don't think they had any idea, and I hope that they don't watch this and know that I heard them say this. So I'm just going to say them rather than pointing out what gender this person was. But I heard this person saying to another person at the table, if this ship ever goes down, I'm going down with it. And I honestly needed to leave the room and cry. I was like, holy shit, that felt so real. And I don't feel like I've deserved that. I don't feel like the company deserves that kind of trust and respect. But I do know that we care a lot about being good.
So how do you teach a toxic genius to turn into a team player? Do you just lock them into a room?
I don't think you can. There you go. That's my only answer.
That's it?
Yeah, I don't think you can. I would give
So
them...
you've never had someone who's brilliant but an absolute nightmare to work with and you change them?
I have. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we no longer work together.
Oh, okay. So let's move on and talk a little bit about my favorite part, which is I throw everybody on desert islands.
Yes.
We're going to strand you. You have no tech, no data, just some coconuts and your own integrity. You said you bring Steven, Birdie, some chef, the founder of Cloudburst Brewing, and someone named Groton. Why these people, and more importantly, who's getting eaten first? And Birdie is your dog. I do remember that.
Yes, Birdie is our 10, maybe 11-pound Shih Tzu.
Oh, I do have a note here. Groton is your photographer friend. Sorry.
Yes, he's my photography buddy. We do a lot of photo walks around the city together. We go out of town and upstate a lot. He's probably not only one of the most talented photographers I know, but I have never had a better teacher of anything ever. Like,
have you been to Cold Spring?
Yeah, I have.
Great place for photographs, especially across from West Point.
Yes,
they have the train tracks and stuff.
And Hot Spring. Yeah, no, it's utterly gorgeous up there, especially around the fall. Oh my god, there is a all fall album on my website, fredspictures.com. For anyone that wants to see it, there's a lot of stuff around there from upstate. So, who would be eaten first? Maybe Grattan, because he's got some meat on him, and he's never going to watch this. He's pretty fat, and I reckon within like day 3 of being on the island, he will have shown me how to photograph the palm trees. So I reckon he can be the first to go. His usefulness will have expired pretty fast. And,
I had noted that these choices reveal your values of loyalty, creative, comfort, and beer, but there goes loyalty out the window. You just ate your friend.
Well, loyalty only goes so far, like day 3, until I'm hungry. If I get hangry, I mean, it could be sooner. So he'd better watch out. He better come up with lots of new ways for me to photograph stuff, and maybe he'll stick around. The founder of Cloudburst, which is the best beer I've ever had in my life.
Right.
Seattle Brewery. It was the guy who used to be the head brewer for Elysian Brewing before they got acquired by AB InBev. And he was so angry by that on the day of the acquisition, he had a t-shirt printed saying, "Fuck you, AB InBev," and went and started Cloudburst, and makes the best beer that I've ever tasted in my life, which, as a guy who lived in the Pacific Northwest for a while, is saying something. So I'd keep him around until at least he's built this, the
infrastructure. Do you have any tasting notes on the beer?
Delicious.
That's all. It's delicious.
Yeah, that's
Hints of delicious.
Hints of delicious with some wet citra hops.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, oh god, it was so good. My god, his beer was so good. I mean, these are IPAs that are so hazy, you need a knife and fork to kind of go through it. But oh god.
So why'd you bring Steven? Is this about survival skills, or you need someone to bounce ideas off?
Well, maybe we need to start an advertising company, and he's the only person I'd do it with. I mean, he honestly is the only reason why Origin really exists today. The man is an absolute genius, and he has no idea how utterly essential and critical he is to the health and well-being of the business. But
he does now. I assume he's going to watch this.
Yeah, no, very much so. I just really needed to plug that. Like you said, no data and no tech, though. I've known the guy since 2015, so 10 years, and I was his co-worker for the first year, his subordinate / minion for 3 years after that, and his business partner for whatever the rest of that time is from 2019 till today. He's just a nice guy. You can trust him. Like, as we've just learned, right? You can't trust me, because if I'll just turn around and eat you, if your usefulness has expired. I don't think Steven would eat you. I think he'd work out how to eat bits of himself first before he touched a hair on your head. So I want that kind of guy on side. And then Birdie's just hilarious. She's an absolute...
So what does that say about you that you chose a dog over another human? Is it loyalty, or is it a way to avoid more arguments?
Anyone who has a dog will be wondering why you're even asking that question. I mean, let's face it, right? Dogs are so much better than humans for so many reasons. But they're entertaining. I would like a bit of variety. So human, dog, lunch, it all it felt like a good group. I could see us keeping ourselves entertained. Like, how long do you think we're on the island for?
It's up to you, I guess. Maybe if you figure a way to get out, use the coconut. So let's give you one piece of modern tech, and it's not a satellite phone. What would you bring?
My camera. Yeah. my Sony 7R5, and if I could only pick one.
You like that? You like the right here? Try it. Sony A7 original.
Well,
Yeah,
if you
use
look
it
over,
for.
yeah,
We have it hooked up. I have
there
a.
you go. That's my photography station. Very untidy.
Yeah, I'm going to use the Sony A7 once we. Still has problem is I can use it for studio. Problem is I can't get the crop marks off the feed, but yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, I'm still figuring that out. So
I've never
you've
shot a
got
second
also
video.
a master's in moral philosophy, dyslexia, and late onset ADHD. I want to make it clear you don't have a master's in dyslexia and late onset ADHD.
Late onset ADHD.
Just in moral philosophy.
Yes, that's right. Moral and political.
It's a bit of a cocktail. How has this shaped your worldview? Does it make you see through nonsense faster, or do you find yourself every time, like at 3 a.m., overthinking?
Well, I definitely overthink things at 3 a.m. I don't sleep a lot, and my lack of sleep is my biggest enemy. I sleep between 3 and 5 hours a night, and it sucks, but it's, what I've come to have to learn to live with. But I would argue that a degree in moral philosophy hasn't helped me see through bullshit so much as it's helped teach me how to create the bullshit. But I do think that what I do love about it is not knowing that I, had this dopamine deficiency, and not knowing that reading was so difficult, understanding why, whilst trying to do a master's in philosophy. What I think I really got out of reading philosophy was the ability to think and explore laterally rather than just sort of in a linear or vertical capacity. It's very, very easy for me to go in different directions to how the brain might normally go. And I use it a lot at work when we're coming up with ideas for our clients. Like we just launched a 12-month flight for Chinet, who do the paper disposable things, and they've got this new agency. They're a fantastic brand. They're really innovative, and the idea that I had to work on their ads was a little out of the box, but it came very quickly, and they loved it immediately, which is lovely, and that's what they hire us for. But that is where I'd say the philosophy really pays, but also listening and respecting perspective. It wasn't just because I was raised by Victorian parents that, it's like I'm right, you're wrong, right? And I rebelled against that. It was that...
You didn't mean like the dead babies in the photographs, Victorian
Exactly, parents. Yeah. Precisely. But and yes, there is a right and there is a wrong. I don't believe people when they say there is no right and no wrong. Sometimes you can have no right or wrong answers, but secretly there's always a right and wrong answer. It's just having the patience to listen to and actually try to appreciate a different perspective to your own, rather than just immediately cutting it off.
So do you see your ADHD as a superpower or just a really annoying sidekick? Like Professor X or Deadpool?
They were both superpower people, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, one was power of the mind. One was a little bit more power of chaos, I think.
The twitching thing, spinning around is the twitching thing does suck, actually. Trying to be comfortable in the evenings sucks. Trying to be comfy in bed sucks. In all of those regards, the physical side of it sucks. And the other bit that sucks is when, my darling wife is telling me something. And
she has a lot of patience.
And I'm hearing her, and I'm listening to her, but I can't hear her. So that does all suck. But you give me a DeLorean and say, hey, go back and somehow magically change your world so you didn't have this thing. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think it's a huge part of who I am, it's not a part of my identity, but it comprises what has created, I think, a very different kind of identity. And I'm really proud of it. And I'm really grateful to see the world the way that I do, like lots of other people do. But to have that lack of the sort of no filters thing is definitely a big part of it. And I think that allows me and others to cut through bullshit. I think it helps me see the world a lot less seriously than it really is, and to really appreciate that just don't be harmful to people, but, enjoy life for what it is and go a bit guns out now and then and like see what happens, see what shakes out. Having that kind of energy. And also Origin's the third company that I have started and hopefully, sold the other two, and maybe one day, back to that, thing earlier, if anyone wants to buy a company, like this will hopefully be the third that I sell. Like, I think it takes a type of person to be able to do that. Right? I've been self-employed for the vast majority of my adult life. And there is no fear attached, where there should be fear about leaving a stable, steady income and going and doing that. The blinkers that just sort of force it make it a much easier thing to do. Like, some people might say stupid, but in a way you're kind of like locking out a lot of what might put you off. So you just need to make sure that what you are listening to is reasoned and rational, and you're not trying to convince yourself of something, as being a good idea. Like, you got to try and remain objective, basically, which is hard when you don't know what it is. Like, I didn't know, I was diagnosed at 37, and it was actually a very, very difficult time for me when that happened, because it was getting progressively worse. And a lot of people start to get a lot of symptoms of manic depression when they're on the cusp of basically having it realized for them what their problem is. So it was a very tricky time, but once through it, everything changed. The world really brightened up, and I have forgotten how that sentence began.
So if you're against isolation, why do you work for a company that's fully remote? And can't we just admit we're better off alone?
I have my days when I love the fact that Origin's remote, and I have my days when I absolutely hate it, the fact that Origin's remote. But it's how the business is. When we started putting together our team, we never had to worry about the geographic location of anybody. We could just find the absolute right and best and most talented person for the job. And that's allowed us to have people everywhere from Michigan to California, Oregon, Connecticut, all across the board. And 6 years on and a pandemic later, I really do wish that we could all be in a room together. There's no doubt. I think if we had a little office, I think things would move significantly faster pace, but it's just not the reality.
All right, so before we go, if you could sum up your philosophy on life in one sentence, what would it be? And you can't do any cliches here. I want the Fred Godfrey special.
Probably the realization I had after my accident in 2022, which is, and I guess this might fall under cliche or it might fall under justifiable, but life is quick, and don't forget that fact. Don't think, oh, fuck it, I'll just do this thing tomorrow or another time. If you're too tired, like, the feeling that everybody has where it's like, I meant to go out tonight to socialize, and I'd frankly just much rather crack open a beer and sit on the sofa and watch some ad-supported TV and help fund Origin, etc., right? Like, find that little bit of energy and lift your ass up off the sofa and go out and do that thing. Because it honestly could be the last time you ever have a chance to do it.
Now your favorite part is the music.
Yay!
That's a wrap. And we're still crying over a detergent ad. And there you have it. Fred Godfrey, the only person in ADTech who can dissect DCO strategy, leadership philosophy, and cold wash detergent commercials with the same emotional weight. Also, if you're on a desert island with Fred, don't get too comfortable, especially if you've got photographer build. Huge thank you to our sponsors, Incremental and Troutman Amin. You're the reason this show still exists and hasn't been replaced by a branded AI chatbot named Kevin. If you liked this episode, tell your creative team. If you loved this episode, tell your procurement department. And if you're still optimizing your 7th CTA variant right now, maybe go touch grass, or at least call Origin. Stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.